Welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into today's incredible tale of Norse mythology and Viking honor, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy these ancient stories, subscribe for more Viking legends, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. Now, let's journey back to the age of the Vikings. The morning mist clung to the crystalline waters of the fjord, like the breath of sleeping giants, swirling in ethereal patterns that seemed to dance with ancient secrets. Tall pine trees stood sentinel along the rocky shoreline, their dark silhouettes piercing through the pale dawn light that painted the sky in shades of silver and gold. The air carried the crisp scent of pine needles and salt water, mingling with the earthy aroma of moss-covered stones that had witnessed countless seasons pass in this remote corner of the Norse lands. Leif Stormcaller had been walking this familiar path since before the sun kissed the horizon, his leather boots crunching softly against the mixture of fallen leaves and smooth pebbles that lined the fjord's edge. The veteran warrior carried himself with the measured gait of one who had seen many battles, his weathered hands resting comfortably on the worn handle of his ancestral sword. Years of sailing across treacherous seas and standing shield to shield with his brothers in arms had carved deep lines around his steel-grey eyes, each wrinkle a testament to the wisdom earned through hardship and loss. The settlement behind him still slumbered in the early morning quiet, smoke rising lazily from the thatched roofs of longhouses where families began their daily routines. Children would soon emerge to tend to goats and chickens, while the women prepared hearty meals of porridge and preserved fish. The men would gather to discuss the day's work, whether to repair fishing nets, tend to crops before the harsh winter arrived, or plan trading expeditions to distant shores. It was a life of simple rhythms, governed by the seasons and the will of the gods. But this morning, something felt different. The usual symphony of awakening birds seemed muted, replaced by an otherworldly silence that made the hair on Leif's neck stand on end. Even the gentle lapping of waves against the shore sounded distant, as if the very fjord held its breath in anticipation of something profound. The warrior had learned long ago to trust these instincts. They had saved his life more times than he could count during raids and explorations across the northern seas. As he rounded a bend where ancient birch trees leaned over the water like elderly storytellers sharing secrets, Leif heard it, a sound that cut through the morning stillness like a blade through silk. It was weeping. Not the simple tears of a child who had scraped a knee, but the deep, soul-wrenching sobs of someone whose very spirit had been shattered. The sound seemed to echo off the fjord's steep walls, multiplying and amplifying until it felt as though the mountains themselves were mourning. Leif quickened his pace, his warrior's instincts immediately alert to potential danger. In these lands, a person alone and vulnerable could attract wolves, bears, or worse, raiders from hostile clans who showed no mercy to the defenseless. His hand instinctively moved to his sword hilt, fingers wrapping around the familiar grip that had been worn smooth by his father's hands and his father's father before him. Emerging from behind a cluster of weathered boulders that jutted from the shoreline like the knuckles of buried giants, Leif saw her. A woman sat upon a flat stone at the water's very edge, her form silhouetted against the shimmering surface of the fjord. Her long hair, the color of autumn wheat, cascaded down her back in waves that caught the morning light like spun gold. She wore a simple woolen dress of deep blue, the same shade as the fjord's depths, and her shoulders shook with each sob that escaped her lips. The warrior approached slowly, his boots making deliberate noise against the stones to announce his presence without startling her. In his experience, desperate people could be as dangerous as cornered animals, and he had no desire to add to whatever pain already consumed this stranger. As he drew closer, he could see that she was young, perhaps no more than 25 summers, yet her posture spoke of someone who had endured losses that would age anyone beyond their years. "Sister," Leif called softly, using the respectful term for any woman of his people, "what brings such sorrow to this peaceful place? Are you injured? Lost?" The woman's head turned toward him, revealing a face that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Her eyes, blue as the deepest parts of the fjord, were red-rimmed with tears that continued to flow like an endless stream. Her skin, though pale from grief, had the healthy glow of someone who spent time outdoors, and her features spoke of good bloodlines, perhaps the daughter of a jarl or respected craftsman. "Warrior," she spoke, her voice carrying the musical lilt of the northern dialects, yet heavy with despair. "I thank you for your concern, but there is no healing for what ails me. The wound I bear cannot be bound with cloth or treated with herbs. It festers in my very soul, and each breath I draw only prolongs the agony." Leif studied her carefully, noting the way she held herself, not with the defeated slouch of someone broken by circumstance, but with a strange dignity that seemed almost otherworldly. There was something about her presence that made the morning air feel charged, like the moments before a great thunderstorm when even the bravest warriors sought shelter. "All wounds can heal, given time and proper care," he replied, settling himself on a nearby stone but maintaining a respectful distance. "I have seen men return from the brink of death and hearts mend from losses that seemed insurmountable. What tragedy has befallen you that you believe yourself beyond hope?" The woman's laugh was bitter as winter wind, carrying no warmth or joy. "Time? There is no time that can restore what I have lost. My beloved husband Einar the Bold sailed with his ships to defend our lands from raiders who came from across the dark seas. He took with him our 2 sons, strong boys who had just begun to grow beards and dream of their own adventures. They were to prove themselves as warriors, to earn their place among the heroes." Her voice broke, and she pressed her hands to her heart as if trying to hold together something that had already shattered beyond repair. "The messenger came 3 days ago. Their ship was seen burning on the horizon. No survivors reached our shores. The sea claimed them all, my husband, my boys, my entire world. I am left with nothing but emptiness and the crushing weight of each sunrise that they will never see." Leif felt his own heart clench with sympathy. He had seen this grief before, the hollow-eyed stare of parents who had outlived their children, the walking death of spouses left behind by war or accident. It was a pain that no amount of gold or glory could ease, a wound that cut deeper than any blade. "The gods test us in ways we cannot understand," he offered gently, though the words felt inadequate against such profound loss. "Perhaps they have plans for your husband and sons that we mortals cannot comprehend. In Valhalla, they feast with heroes and await the final battle. Their story is not ended, merely continued in another realm." The woman shook her head, her tears falling more freely now. "What comfort is that to me, warrior? What solace can I find in knowing they celebrate in halls I cannot enter while I remain trapped in this world of shadows? Each dawn mocks me with its beauty, each meal tastes like ash in my mouth. I cannot bear another day, another hour of this existence without them." She rose from her stone and turned to face Leif fully, her blue eyes meeting his with startling intensity. "I have heard tales of your people's honor, of the mercy warriors show to those who suffer beyond endurance. I ask this of you, stranger. Grant me the peace that the gods seem unwilling to provide. Let your blade end this torment quickly and cleanly." The request hit Leif like a physical blow. In all his years of warfare and wandering, he had never been asked to take a life in such circumstances. To strike down an enemy in battle was one thing. It was expected, honorable, necessary for survival. But to end the life of a grieving woman, no matter how genuine her pain, it challenged everything he understood about honor and duty. "You ask a heavy thing," he said slowly, his hand unconsciously moving away from his sword. "To take a life in mercy, I am not certain the gods would view such an act with favor. Your grief is real, your pain undeniable, but perhaps there is another path. You speak of having nothing left, but you still draw breath. Where there is life, there is possibility for new purpose, new connections, new meaning." The woman stepped closer, her presence seeming to fill the space between them with an energy that made the air itself feel thick and electric. Purpose? What purpose can there be for a mother without children, a wife without husband? I am like a tree whose roots have been torn from the earth. I may stand for a time, but I am already dying from within. Please, warrior, you seem kind and honorable. Do not force me to seek a slower, more painful death. Grant me this final mercy." Leif stood slowly, his mind racing as he tried to find wisdom in a situation that seemed to offer no good choices. The woman's pain was genuine. He could see it in every line of her body, hear it in every word she spoke. Yet something nagged at him, a warrior's instinct that whispered of things not being entirely as they seemed. "Tell me your name," he said finally. "If I am to consider such a request, I should at least know who asks it of me." The woman hesitated for the briefest moment, so quickly that Leif almost missed it. "I am called Astrid Sorrowbearer, though that name has meaning only since my loss. Before, I was simply Astrid the Blessed, wife to Einar, mother to Olaf and Magnus. But those titles died with them, leaving only grief to define me. And I am Leif Stormcaller, son of Eric the Weatherwise, veteran of 30 campaigns across the northern seas." He studied her face carefully as he spoke, noting the way her eyes seemed to flash with something beyond mere sorrow when he mentioned his own lineage and achievements. "In all my years, I have learned that the gods rarely present us with situations that have simple solutions. Your pain demands respect, but your request demands consideration of consequences that reach beyond this moment." Astrid nodded slowly, her tears beginning to slow, but not stopping entirely. "I understand your hesitation, Leif Stormcaller. It is not an easy thing, I ask, but consider this. If you were to lose everything that gave your life meaning, would you not seek the same release? When the darkness is so complete that no light can penetrate it, is not a quick end preferable to slow starvation of the spirit?" The warrior found himself torn between compassion and duty, between the desire to ease suffering and the knowledge that some acts, once done, could never be undone. The morning sun had risen higher now, burning away the mist and revealing the fjord in all its stark beauty. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out as it circled above the water, and the sound seemed to carry with it the voices of all who had ever faced impossible choices. "Give me a moment to think," Leif said at last, turning to look out over the water where the light danced in patterns that seemed almost alive. "This is not a decision to be made in haste." As he stood there, wrestling with the weight of the choice before him, neither he nor Astrid noticed the way the shadows seemed to shift and deepen around them, or how the very air began to thrum with a power that spoke of divine attention. The gods, it seemed, were indeed watching this moment unfold, and the choices made here would ripple far beyond the peaceful shores of the fjord. The silence stretched between them like a taut bowstring, filled with the weight of unspoken thoughts and the magnitude of the choice that hung in the morning air. Leif's weathered hands clenched and unclenched as he stared across the fjord's surface, where the strengthening sunlight created an ever-shifting tapestry of gold and silver that seemed to mock the darkness of their conversation. Behind him, he could hear Astrid's quiet breathing, punctuated by the occasional soft sob that spoke of grief too deep for words. The warrior had faced death countless times, had stared into the eyes of berserkers drunk on battle fury, had weathered storms that could swallow longships whole, had stood against odds that would have broken lesser men. Yet none of those moments had prepared him for this, being asked to become an instrument of mercy for someone whose pain was so profound that death seemed preferable to continued existence. "In all my travels," Leif said finally, his voice carrying across the water, "I have learned that the gods often speak to us through our deepest struggles, not with thunder and lightning, but through the quiet moments when we must choose between easy paths and right ones. Your sorrow is real, Astrid Sorrowbearer, and it deserves honor. But I wonder, have you truly explored every alternative?" Astrid's reflection wavered in the still water near the shore as she shook her head slowly. "What alternatives exist for the living dead? I have tried to find meaning in the daily tasks, preparing meals no one will eat, mending clothes no one will wear, tending a hearth that provides warmth to no one but myself. Every sunrise feels like a betrayal of those who will never see another dawn. Every sunset reminds me of the darkness that has consumed my world. The wind picked up slightly, rustling through the pine needles above them and carrying with it the scent of distant snow, a reminder that winter was approaching, bringing with it the long months of cold and shortened days that tested everyone's endurance. It was during these dark seasons that many Norse found their faith most challenged, when the absence of light made every burden feel heavier. Perhaps, Leif suggested carefully, your pain could become a source of strength for others who suffer similar losses. The gods may have preserved your life not as punishment, but as preparation for a purpose you have not yet discovered. How many other women have lost husbands and children to war? How many would benefit from the wisdom that only someone who has walked through such darkness can provide? Astrid turned from the water to look at him directly, her blue eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and something that might have been anger. You speak of wisdom, as if there is something noble about this torment. Tell me, Leif Stormcaller, what wisdom is there in waking each day to emptiness? What strength can I offer others when I have none left for myself? I am not a wise woman or a healer. I am simply a broken vessel that can hold nothing but sorrow. The intensity of her gaze made Leif step back slightly, not from fear, but from a growing sense that there was more to this woman than met the eye. The way she held herself, the careful precision of her words, even the rhythm of her breathing, it all spoke of someone accustomed to command, to being heard and obeyed. Yet her grief seemed genuine, her pain as real as the stones beneath their feet. Broken vessels can be mended, he replied, though his voice carried less certainty than before, and sometimes they become stronger at the places where they were cracked. The Japanese craftsmen of distant lands have a practice of repairing pottery with gold, making the repaired piece more beautiful than the original. Perhaps your cracks could be filled with something precious as well. Astrid laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, only the bitter edge of someone who had moved beyond hope. Pretty words, warrior, but I am not pottery to be repaired and displayed. I am flesh and blood and breaking heart, and I know my own limits. I have reached them. Please, if you have any mercy in your soul, grant me this final kindness. As she spoke, she moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns woven into her dress, designs that seemed to shift and change as he watched, like images seen in firelight or cloud formations that revealed different shapes to different observers. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, far beyond what most village seamstresses could achieve, and the threads themselves seemed to catch and hold light in ways that defied natural explanation. Leif felt his resolve wavering. The woman's pain was undeniable, her request spoken with such heartfelt desperation that refusing it felt almost cruel. His hand moved slowly toward his sword hilt, fingers tracing the familiar grooves worn by generations of his family. The blade had taken many lives in honorable combat. Perhaps it could serve mercy as well as war. If I were to consider your request, he said slowly, each word carefully measured, it would not be done lightly or without proper ceremony. The gods would need to be consulted, proper rites observed. A life, even one freely given up, deserves respect. Astrid nodded eagerly, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time since he had found her. Yes, of course. I would not want it done carelessly or without honor, but please, do not delay too long seeking signs and portents. Each moment I continue to exist is another moment of torment, another heartbeat of pain that serves no purpose. The warrior drew his sword slowly, the steel singing softly as it cleared the leather scabbard. The blade was a masterwork of Norse craftsmanship, forged by his grandfather's own hands from iron taken from a fallen star. Its edges gleamed with a light that seemed to come from within the metal itself, and along its length ran runic inscriptions that spoke of honor, duty, and the protection of the innocent. "Kneel," he said quietly, and let us ask the gods to witness what we do here. If they approve of this mercy, let them send a sign. If they disapprove—" He left the sentence unfinished, hoping that divine intervention would spare him from making this terrible choice. Astrid sank to her knees on the smooth stones, her golden hair cascading around her shoulders like a waterfall of light. She tilted her head back, exposing her neck, and closed her eyes. "I am ready, Leif Stormcaller. Thank you for this kindness. When you reach the halls of the gods, know that one grateful soul will speak your name with honor." Leif raised the sword slowly, his movements deliberate and ceremonial. The blade caught the morning sunlight, sending brilliant reflections dancing across the fjord's surface. But as he prepared to strike, something extraordinary happened that would be remembered and retold for generations to come. The air around them began to thicken and shimmer, taking on the quality of water disturbed by an unseen hand. The morning light seemed to bend and concentrate, forming into patterns that hurt to look at directly. A sound filled the air, not quite music, not quite thunder, but something that resonated in the bones and made the very stones beneath their feet vibrate in harmony. And then, with a presence that made the fjord itself seem small and insignificant, a figure materialized between Leif and the kneeling woman. He stood nearly as tall as the warrior, but carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding not just armies, but the respect of gods themselves. His hair was dark as a moonless night, shot through with silver that caught the light like captured starfire. He wore armor that seemed to be forged from the essence of justice itself, not mere metal, but something that embodied the concepts of honor, sacrifice, and righteous judgment. But it was his hand that drew immediate attention, or rather, the absence of it. Where his right hand should have been, there was only a leather-wrapped stump, a reminder of the greatest sacrifice ever made for the good of all. This was Tyr, god of war and justice, the one-handed guardian of oaths and protector of the righteous. "Hold, Leif Stormcaller," the god spoke, his voice carrying the authority of mountains and the wisdom of ages. "That blade was forged to defend life, not to end it in despair. Lower your weapon and step away from the woman." Leif stumbled backward, his sword point dropping to touch the stones, as his knees nearly buckled under the weight of divine presence. Every instinct screamed at him to kneel, to press his face to the ground before such majesty. But something in Tyr's bearing suggested that respect was required, not prostration. "Great Tyr," the warrior managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "I seek only to show mercy to one who suffers beyond endurance. Her pain is real, her loss complete. Surely there is honor in granting peace to those who can find none in life." The god's gaze, piercing blue eyes that seemed to see not just the present moment, but all the choices that had led to it, and all the consequences that would flow from it, shifted between Leif and the woman who still knelt with bowed head. "Honor?" Tyr's voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement, though it was tempered with gravity. "Tell me, mortal warrior, what do you know of the woman whose life you would take? Have you examined her story with the same care you would use to evaluate an enemy's defenses? Have you considered whether all is as it appears?" Confusion clouded Leif's features. "She has told me of her losses, great one. Her husband and sons taken by raiders, their ship burned on the sea. Her grief speaks of truth. No one could feign such pain." "Grief, yes," Tyr nodded slowly. "But whose grief, and what manner of being kneels before you now, seeking death from your blade?" The god raised his remaining hand, and power flowed from his fingers like visible light. It washed over the kneeling woman, and as it touched her, she began to change. Her simple blue dress transformed, becoming armor of silver and gold that gleamed like captured starlight. Her golden hair brightened until it seemed to burn within a fire, and when she raised her head, her eyes held depths that spoke of wisdom far beyond mortal years. Great white wings unfurled from her shoulders, spanning wide enough to embrace the fjord itself. She rose to her feet with fluid grace, no longer the broken woman seeking death, but something magnificent and otherworldly. This was no mortal maiden. This was a Valkyrie, one of Odin's own choosers of the slain, a divine warrior maiden whose purpose was to guide fallen heroes to their eternal rewards. "Behold," Tyr announced, his voice carrying across the water and echoing off the fjord's walls, "Sigrid the Truthseeker, daughter of battle, servant of the All-Father. She came to this place not seeking death, but seeking something far more precious, a glimpse into the true heart of mortal honor." And so ends this tale of divine testing and mortal compassion, where the gods themselves walked among us to measure the worth of human hearts. Leif Stormcaller would indeed journey to Valhalla, but not as a reward for ending life, rather for his willingness to show mercy even when mercy seemed impossible. In the great halls of the gods, he found that true honor lies not in the blade's edge, but in the courage to choose compassion over convenience, wisdom over haste. The Valkyrie, Sigrid, returned to her eternal duties, carrying with her the knowledge that among mortals there still existed those whose hearts could recognize the sacred nature of life, even in its darkest moments. And the fjord where they met became known as Mercy's Shore, where travelers would pause to remember that the greatest strength often lies in staying one's hand, and the greatest victories are won not through violence, but through understanding. What did you think of this tale of Norse wisdom and divine intervention? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the age of Vikings and the rich mythology of the North.